Oh, so we're live. We are, yeah. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Secular Jihadists from the Middle East podcast. My name is Ali Rizvi. I'm the author of The Atheist Muslim. And with me, we have the usual suspects, and that's what we say. We've got Yasmin Mohammed, author of Confessions of an Ex-Muslim. And she's at confessionsofanexmuslim.com. Hello, Yaz. How are you?
Hello, Ali.
And we also have Armin Navabi, the founder of the biggest online platform for atheists in the world, the Atheist Republic. Hi, Armin. How's it going? And also the author of Why There Is No God. And today we have someone joining us who, we're all a little bit self-conscious about our voices because this is possibly, he's going to turn red when I say this, the sexiest voice in atheism.
He's talking to me, Seth.
God. Oh, good.
Good. And we've got Seth Andrews from the Thinking Atheist podcast, which is actually one of the top atheist podcasts in the world. He's got a huge listenership. He's inspired a lot of us, myself included. Hi, Seth. How's it going?
Hey, it's a joy to be here. Thank you guys for I was going to say Allahu Akbar before I started, but I can't get away with it. But I wanted to say thanks for allowing me to play along today. It's a real pleasure to be a part of the show.
No, it's wonderful to have you here, and I just want to say ahead of time that both of our books have the same subtitle. That was a complete coincidence. Just a journey from religion to reason.
Did you send me a message or something in the development, or I sent you a message? We were just tweaking each other, like, "Hey, nice subtitle, pal."
I know. Yeah, I think you told me that, and then I didn't know what you were saying, and then I went and I looked up your book, which I hadn't read at that point because I just knew you from the podcast.
I love it.
I was mortified. I was like,
I love it. And the truth is that there's nothing new under the sun. I love the idea. Let's say they Google search mine and they find yours or vice versa. I mean, I think it's fantastic. It was just a funny moment.
Yeah, it's just double the fun. So, Seth, we have you here. You've had a great week, haven't you?
Oh yeah, turn the screw. Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah. Well, it's been a weird week. I never thought I would be a controversial figure, and I really still don't think I really am. I think there's just a very vocal, and there's kind of a vocal microcosm that that's in this sort of little eruption that's happened, and they're loud, and it hasn't been my finest week. I don't think it's been one of my favorite weeks.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, my hope is that we can all sort of get our eyes back on the ball and learn from our mistakes and cultivate the best in each other and try to figure out how to get through it. Problem solving is something that I wish that people were better at. I wish the atheist movement was better at. But our challenges and opportunities await. So.
Right. So just to give some background to what Seth is talking about, it was a good teaser, is that recently what happened, and first I'll talk a little bit about what we have gone through and the reason that I thought it'd be great to invite Seth on the podcast right now. So one of the things we have with ex-Muslims who criticize Islam is that you tend to attract a lot of support from people you don't really want. There are people who actually want to ban all Muslims, kill all Muslims. I've heard messages from people saying the only good Muslim is a dead Muslim, and they expect me to agree with them because I criticize Islam and I'm an atheist and I'm an ex-Muslim. And that's clearly not what I support. And it's completely against all the values that made me want to be an atheist. So, and made me want to leave Islam. I actually don't even see it that different. But, on the other hand, if you even have a conversation with somebody and you criticize Islam in any way, suddenly you have all of these people on the far left coming up and calling you a Nazi sympathizer. It's like, oh, you hate all Muslims because you're criticizing Islam. And this is something that I think all of us in the ex-Muslim community have noticed happening for years now. It's obviously a problem. You have to navigate. You wonder about how you should say things. Sometimes you just feel like there's times it can be very, very frustrating. So what happened recently with Seth is Seth kind of went through the same thing, and there's a conference happening, and they have Seth, do you want to explain that?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Do you want me to speak about it?
Yeah, I was thinking if it comes from you,
there was some crosstalk and it was canceled out. Forgive me. I thought Yasmin was going to jump in and say something, melodious, and I knew Armin wouldn't. Anyway,
we'll get Yaz on soon.
So Well, I was invited back early this year to be a part of the Myth Information Conference put on by the Mythicist Milwaukee guys. Nice guys, They said, we're doing a premiere of a film called Batman and Jesus. We'd like you to come be a red carpet guest. I'm like, great. What time would you like me to speak? You want to be on stage and do a presentation? Because that's normally what I do. If you're going to pay for the plane ticket and the hotel, get some value out of the thing. And they're like, no. We want you to come and be a part of the event. You want me to come just to be a part of the movie red carpet thing? Yeah. Okay, fine. Cool. And so, I'm at, then months pass and I'm at the American Atheist National Convention, and it comes on my radar that apparently there's a big blow up about the speaker lineup because it included 3 controversial YouTubers. I don't follow a lot I don't follow content. You guys are content producers. How much time do you have to go and follow all the drama and the infighting and I don't even watch the people I like usually because I don't have the time. But apparently these people, I know Sargon especially, I posted a video years ago and thousands of his people came and kind of caused some trouble on my pages, but I don't pay a lot of attention to that.
It's not Sargon of Akkad, the YouTube.
Yeah, it's not my playground. I don't really care. I don't monitor comments. You can get tripped up by the pebbles so easily in this business. And I'm guilty of I just didn't care. Like, whatever. He's not my problem. I'm focused on the tasks at hand. But the furor over this really grew, and what you saw was a protest that Sargon had ties to the alt-right, and Richard Spencer, the white supremacist, was apparently a fan. And he'd said some unfortunate stuff, and the other 2 were bad choices as well. Shuan Head and Armored Skeptic, and they shouldn't be given the platform. And why are these other atheists going along to associate? Matt Dillahunty was going to moderate a debate between Faisal and it was Azar Namani, who I think he was debating.
Yeah,
and there was going to be Thomas Smith, was actually going to be there to debate Sargon of Akkad. And then I think the other 2 YouTubers had their own kind of uncontested platform. And then beyond that, there was Ron Miscavige, ex-Scientologist, and a bunch of people on the guest list, Aaron Raw and Dave Fitzgerald. And so people there's just this weird sort of polarization that takes place. One side is saying, the extremes of the side is saying anyone who would associate with these horrible speakers, these bigots, these whoever, anyone who would participate in a conference is an enabler of bigotry and racism and sexism, and you're putting people in danger, and it's irresponsible. We can see your true colors. You're aligned. Are you really a white supremacist? Look at you, a white male. Is this a coincidence? That kind of thing. And then on the other side, you have the people who are free speech, who are saying, hey, man, just give them a chance. If you really knew who they were, if you really followed their stuff, if you knew what you were talking about, if you saw their work in context, you'd realize they deserve a seat at the table. And so both sides are squaring off, and the volume gets louder and louder, and the vitriol gets worse and worse. And, I was all over the place. I'd never seen anything like it. I didn't really know what to do. I'm a free speech guy. And I say this to this day. MythCon has the right to invite whoever they want without threat, without intimidation, without somebody, without being heckled, without somebody threatening violence, without any of that stuff. They have the right to set up their own thing. And people can even have a right to say whatever they want to say. I'm a free speech guy. We have the right to decide to listen or not listen, to accept, to reject, to agree or condemn. But we do so as respectful, responsible people. And I didn't see a lot of respect or responsible going on in this debate. And so it just blew up. I, at one point, agreed to go speak. Like, all right, fine. If this is going to happen, I actually said I had some concerns, and they said, we'll give you a speaking slot. Like, if you feel like it's imbalanced and these guys are really bad choices, we'll give you a slot. And I initially said, cool. And then the obvious occurred to me, wait a minute, they put me in a position now where if I go and speak, I'm having to speak out against my hosts and 3 people on the docket. and enter a swarm of controversy of who knows what I'm walking into. This is not why I do conferences. I go to conferences to express and share ideas and to create community. I don't go to try to buttress the reputations of YouTubers. I don't go because I'm trying to stir YouTube clicks. I'm not trying to be I don't want controversy for its own sake. And so I finally just pulled the plug. Before I pulled the plug, I did suggest, I made a recommendation, and of course I call them the outrage brigade, just flipped out. I recommended to MythCon, I said, I really think you guys should pull the invitations of these very unfortunate three, because I consider them very unfortunate. If we're going to bring in disagreeing opinions, respectful opinions, we're going to have the kind of discourse they're pitching. These three are not who you want. They're just not. It's obvious now. I came late to that party because I was late really getting interested enough to find out who these people are. But I mean, like, this serves no one except perhaps them. You should I'd much rather hear Ron Miscavige talk about his escape from Scientology than I'd rather hear Siobhan Head talk about whatever. I have no idea what. I browsed her YouTube or her Twitter page. It was just like white noise. I had no idea what that was about. I'd rather hear Matt Dillahunty talk about debate tactics. Hell, I'd rather see him do a magic show than to hear Sargon go out and sort of do his thing, which is controversy. And they politely declined. But of course, with the death of Nuance online, everybody thought, well, Seth tried to blackmail MythCon into denying the platform for these people because he's a bigot or whatever. And I'm like, no, actually, I've been doing this a long time, and I made a recommendation because I thought it would be best for MythCon and the audience, but I never made an ultimatum. I never had a condition. I never threatened to pull out. I just said, hey, you might consider doing this. And I was honest at the very beginning to everybody that I had done that. It's something I now regret. I wish I hadn't made that suggestion. I wish I'd not said, it's unrealistic at that measure for them to pull the speakers. They should have stuck with who they had. And
Seth, sorry, can I interrupt just for a second? I just wanted you said that you didn't want to walk into in Sargon, and because he's there to do controversy. So based on the video clip that you posted, I just want to kind of bring this to light. It wasn't just controversy. I mean, there was a video clip where he was justifying using the N-word. Why it's okay, why it's okay to use words like spick and chink, and there's a YouTube clip that you posted, and I think that, and you said that was sort of instrumental in why you thought this was beyond just discourse. It wasn't just about discourse. It was about somebody who was like it didn't seem like there was any reason involved there.
Yeah,
so there's a difference between. I just want to ask you. I mean, you make a distinction between, say, people who have far right views, which are, I guess, even if you don't agree with them, which are well argued, versus stuff like saying that, okay, if a guy says, I don't want you to call me the N-word, then he's wrong, and we should be able to say it because it's just a word.
There's a longer version of the clip that I posted, and I should have posted them both, but I was naive enough to think that the shorter one proved my point, and I still think it does. Mm-hmm. To see somebody so flippantly rattle off these tremendously horrible ethnic and sexual slurs shows you his point is that offense is not given. Offense is taken, or what I'm saying, like I don't offend you, you become offended. The offense is upon you. And there are some contexts where we can talk about offense. A lot of people use offense as a way to protect themselves from having to engage or to receive new information, but there is genuinely offensive. I mean, there's dehumanizing speech out there. There's speech that brings so much negative baggage that is only really designed to harm. And my point is that by using that language and so just flippantly throwing it out the way he did, he demonstrated he's not the good faith agent of the types of ideas that we want to be expressing. He's demonstrated why he is not the guy we should be listening to. Mm. And of course, they came after me for that. They came after me for, well, you don't understand his context, or you're not being fair to his point, or you're giving too much credit to the power of language, or you're just a snowflake, or
or you want to try and cut down free speech, but this was not about free speech. It was more about decency. Or
it is, and I remain a speech guy, and I agree with Hitchens. I don't want anybody else to tell me what I can and cannot hear. I'm a big kid. I get to decide what I accept and reject. And I think that the First Amendment has to protect even the most awful speech. And I think that's one of the distinctions, and it's one of the big fights that we're seeing now is there are some who say speech is violence. So I asked one gentleman, I said, do you think that a word spoken is the same as a bullet fired? And he said, yes, it is. And I think words are powerful. Words can harm, but I just don't make the speech violence connection. But if you do, then when someone invites somebody like Sargon of Akkad to say what they consider to be violent speech, provocative speech, insightful speech, then they see it as a human rights issue and a safety issue, and all of these other things come into play. You must protect the attendees from this guy who's going to wield such powerful language, horrible vitriolic language. Who could ever support such a thing? And the fight's been going on for weeks.
But Seth, you invited somebody like Dan Arrow on your show, somebody that actually advocates for violence, right?
Yeah.
So if you basically, and I listened to that, and you did a very good job at exposing why his ideas were nonsense. I really like the way you closed that.
Thanks.
So given that how useful it was to give platform to somebody like that and expose them for who they are and expose them for why their ideas are bad, isn't it also a good idea to somebody that is actually advocating for violence? You give them a platform. So why not give platform for somebody with bad ideas and challenge them on those platforms the same way you did that?
That has merit. Now with Dan, there was a little bit of baggage there because we had started actually with he had not been that extreme. We'd had him on the radio to talk about secular parenting, and he had followed some of the Ark Encounter, and there was no evidence of any of this sort of more extreme pro-Antifa, punch a Nazi, all policemen are terrorists kind of rhetoric that was coming off his pages, and it was alarming to me. And we had a cordial yet very direct 35 minutes on the air. The distinction I make with some of these people is, I would go on stage and talk to somebody from Westboro Baptist Church, talk about hate speech, talk about just awful, hateful, disgusting, bigoted speech. But if it was exposing bad ideas and promoting good ones, I'd take the stage with them. Hell, I'd go to lunch with them. But the challenge I had with MythCon is that I more and more could not escape the suspicion that they were using the credibility of names like myself and other activists on the guest list, non-participants, to buttress the popularity of people who are in sort of the controversy for clicks business. So for them, there's no bad press. If they go and they knock it out of the park for some reason, then they gain credibility and they go up a notch on the run. If they go and things go horrible and they're shouted down, then they translate that into a controversial YouTube video that gets 300, 500, a million clicks, whatever, 1,000 clicks. If controversy is your oxygen and there's no way to really have a bad day, then that gives me pause, because now you're not operating in the arena of ideas. You're there just to stir the pot, and
but
you're not.
But haven't they already? But don't they also achieve that by you not going to the event? Don't they also get credibility by being the people that made you not go to the event? Like, isn't this whole thing bringing them more attention? Wouldn't that wear that as a badge of honor?
I mean, yeah. It's a lose-lose. Trust me. I'm a little irritated. I'm irritated with MythCon for putting me in this position. I'm irritated with myself I took, I'd never navigated something like this, and I handled some stuff wrong. I said some things wrong. It took me a while to get through it. I look at what I might have done differently. Let's say I go Well, now I'm on stage, and we're all going to hang out and buddy. Now we're all having photographs taken together. Great. I get photos that get to be passed around on whose website with me and Sargon of Akkad hanging out. Well, wait till the haters get a load of that one. Or, am I being used? If the only reason I'm there is to be used to propel somebody's name, well, that leaves a bad taste in my mouth. So it was really a decision of where my values are. I do enough of these. I don't need MythCon. I didn't sign up to go be a part of this big circus. I signed up to show up to a movie premiere, and much too late, I finally came to the conclusion that this is grief I don't need. These are people I don't necessarily want to support in any way. I've got other fish to fry. I've got other content to produce. Life's too short. So I cut my losses and split. And now I'm getting it from both sides. They're just going after me, and they're welcome. But I'm amazed at the amount of bad faith operation going on. There's some bad faith operators. They thrive on drama. They thrive on grief. They thrive on jabbing at the wound. They make no allowances for good people who are just trying to do the right thing and sometimes screw up and try to fix it and apologize. Hell, I went and apologized for the times that I'd made a mistake, or I made the wrong choice, or even used the wrong kind of language. I apologized to some of the YouTubers I got into some name calling. I said, I don't use my voice to amplify the voices of clowns. Well, it was a wrong thing to say. I mean, I should be about the ideas. And instead I went after them because it's how I felt at the moment. It was just a cheap shot. And I went back and publicly said, that was wrong. I have
you apologized for making snarky comments rather than
actually. I have.
Yeah, but you didn't offend them; they took offense.
Well, one thing I want to point out is that we don't usually see people mentioning I made a mistake here, I made a mistake there, and that's very rare, right? For people to say I made a mistake, and we need more of that. And seriously, like this is. People admitting mistakes, I mean, people saying, looking back and being critical of their actions, that's something not very common, which is
really well, to them it's weakness, or you're a flake, or you're insincere, or you apologize too late. I mean, there's no scenario that will make some people happy. Now, there are others who were very charitable and gracious, and they're like, we got you, we know you, we're familiar with your life and your character and your years of work, and we know that you love people, and we've all been there, and we got your back. And there was a ton of those people. I got private messages from, and not just fellow activists, but listeners from all over who said, hang in there, we got you. And that's amazing. But it's amazing as well how many just bad faith operators are out there who just they're not happy unless they're freaking miserable. And they just come after you. They must have a shit ton of time on their hands because they just come after you all the time. I don't know how you guys do it. Are you targets all the time?
Some of these people, I think they just have a lot of hate in them, and they're just looking for some opportunity to expel that. Usually, I mean, I don't really know these YouTubers at all. I have to admit, I'm like what you were saying at the beginning. Like I couldn't care less, really. I don't pay attention. Yeah. Right? But the only thing I've ever seen of Sargon's was the video that you posted. Ali shared the whole video with me, so I watched that because he asked in the description.
Yeah.
And also when he did an interview with Majid Nawaz. Those are the only times I've ever seen him. And I saw Shoe on Head once because somebody shared something with me that she'd said about women under Islam, which was actually really well done. So that's the only thing of hers I've ever seen, and I don't know who the third armored skeptic is. I've no clue.
They're really hard on feminism, and they go hard on SJWs. This is one of those terms that's subjectively applied, and it's always a pejorative. It's always an insult.
But I feel like people talk about free speech all the time. Well, yeah, you have the right to speak, and I have the right to not listen.
Yeah.
If I don't want to listen to you just looking for vitriol to spew or looking for some reason to create drama or controversy, if I'm not interested in listening, I don't need to listen to that.
Yeah.
And it sounds to me, correct me if I'm wrong, like that this Mythbusters people, or is that what they're called? MythCon?
No, they should be. I like them much better.
No, but Mythbusters is amazing. Let's not
let us not tarnish the good name of the Mythbusters.
Right.
Yeah,
MythCon is doing a good job too. It just
they are.
I feel like there's two groups of people here. There's people like you and Matt Dillahunty and Ron Miscavige, and like you were talking about, sitting down and having a panel discussion, which is you know, just like regular dialogue, you know, constructive conversation. And then there's another group of people, which are the YouTubers, which I feel like are not really interested in discussion or in, you know, having any kind of civil discourse. They're just interested in creating controversy and in getting people to go, ooh, oh my God, did you hear what they said? Did you hear what they did? And so it seems strange to me that they would invite these two groups of people to the same conference or to the same.
I've never said this about any conference organizer. I mean, I've been to my share of unfortunate events here and there where something went awry or was poorly handled. While the Mythicist Milwaukee guys are really nice guys, I've never encountered someone who I think was so blissfully unaware of what this movement is, what it needs, how it is best served, and who the agents, the spokespeople we should be. They have a model for what the future of atheist activism is. Oh, conference attendance is down. You know, you're not seeing as many people engaged. There's nothing new under the sun. We need some lifeblood. We need some awesome stuff. Let's bring in these young, vigorous, controversial types, and let's stir the pot and let's get people talking. And I'm like, you are being monumentally irresponsible and inviting some hugely unfortunate people. It's your right to make a stupid ass choice. And I ultimately decided, you know, I'm done. I don't need to be there. And so I've decided to not to participate. And, you know, everybody borrows this for their own agenda. It's either I'm a coward or I'm a sellout, or I was afraid, or I'm not a free speech guy, or I would never engage anybody with a disagreeing opinion, or I want an echo chamber. I mean, who are these people? They have no idea who I am, what they're talking about. It's just inflammatory rhetoric for its own sake.
Yeah, I just want to say something about the free speech thing, because one of the accusations you're going to get is, okay, you're anti-free speech because, you know, you made that request. And you know, one, I actually disagree with you on very, very little, but the only one thing I think that I would, I'm sorry. One thing I would have done is I would have gone anyway, and just to have that dialogue. But I mean, we'll get into that later. I just want to say this one thing about free speech. None of this stuff is anti-free speech. The Mythicist Milwaukee guys, who I also know, and I think that they're great guys. I've done a podcast with them. They even asked me about, you know, getting Sargon there and all these guys there, and I said, you know, you should do whatever you want. Everybody should be able to say whatever they want. So they're not, none of that's violating free speech. You requesting them, you saying that, okay, for my preference is that, you know, if we want to have a productive conference, maybe not have these people there. That's free speech. That's not anti-free speech. That is actually you exercising your free speech. You're not banning them. You're not threatening to, you know, to blow up the place or whatever.
Nor did I threaten to withdraw at that point. I said, I just recommend this.
Right.
You know, and you can take it or leave it. And they left it. It was well after that I finally made the decision to cancel and not go.
Right, which is also free speech. So I mean, this isn't about free speech at all. Right, this is not about that.
But I think, okay. So here's the devil's advocate. So the people that make these conferences, they need more people to show up, or else there's not going to be people buying tickets for them to have. Or else they're going to lose money every time they start a conference, right? So it might be good for, we could sit here and be like, oh, they need to have more sophisticated speakers, who needs controversy? But then at the same time, well, if attendance is low, they're not going to have enough ticket sales for them to be able to run a conference. So they might need the controversy to be able to have anybody show up, right? So that's one devil's advocate. Another devil's advocate is, and I'm also going to do an defense of, not to be too negative. Another devil's advocate is like,
you can ask a question and then he's going to answer.
Wouldn't it be better for you, like just like Ali said, wouldn't it be better for you to just go there and just challenge them it would be less it would be actually less attention to them, because this whole thing is bringing a lot of attention to them. And also Lalo is pointing out that the people that were against this conference, they themselves have more problems and more issues than the people that are invited. As like one of the main people that are against this conference are Dan Arrow, and that you yourself pointed out that the accusations of some of the people that are against the conference are actually ridiculous. But wouldn't it be better to go there, like the way you took down Dan Arrow with your response at the end? That was epic. So if you did that at this conference, it might have been a more effective response. But
to not leave their views unopposed. You know what I mean? Like if
but as a defense, if you're uncomfortable about going to a conference and you're like, I'm not comfortable with going there, you're not responsible for shutting down every single idea that is bad. Like you're not supposed, like, if you don't want to go to something, nobody should tell you that no, you have to go. You're responsible to respond to every bad idea out there, right? So I don't understand. Like, so as a defense, I would want to say, like, this is, at the end of the day, if you saw that I go to conferences to have fun, to meet people that I like, these are not the people that I like, so I'm not going to go. That's just something you're not comfortable with. So
well, I'll answer that question first, because I've already forgotten what your first question was, Armin, because I have the memory of a goldfish.
It was a good one, though, so we'll come back to that.
Come back to it and ask it again.
One by one.
I think, it's funny. Even now, I can see both scenarios playing out. I'm not trying to be a politician about it. I mean, seeing the blow up that not going has caused, it really gained me almost nothing opting out, except that I didn't have to go and worry about it and stress out about it and be there and wonder what was going to happen. And if it was just going to be controversy and chaos. And I'm kind of relieved, because I really don't want that. That's not why I do what I do. But there's a part of me that thinks if that opportunity has been there, I probably should have taken it. I think people can have opinions on both sides, and I think people can have a point on both sides. There are a lot of good reasons to go and speak out, but is this really what I want to do? To go to MythCon at the pleasure of my host and say, I'm sorry, but I find them extremely poor representatives of what good discourse is. They don't represent my values as a humanist, as someone who supports feminism, as someone who wants to treat people with goodness and compassion. I think they are here for controversy or clicks, or to try to raise their bar or get another star, or try to get more exposure or expand their audience, or I don't know, whatever. And I don't want to facilitate that. They put me in a position where I would have to do that. And you guys know me. I'm like the least controversial dude I know. Like all I want to do, I tell people the mission of my work and show, I want to learn stuff. I want to help people. Right? I want to learn stuff. I want to help people. I don't want to have to go into a cage match in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where who knows what's going to happen. And at the end of the day, the only people likely to win are the people who are doing the controversy for clicks thing on YouTube. It just seemed easier to skip. And was it the right decision? I'll probably never fully know, but it's the decision I made, and I'm going to stick with it.
Did you want to ask your second question, Armin?
What was the first question?
The first question.
Well, I think the first one was like, I think I forgot my own first question.
Okay, I have a question.
No, I think it was about people like Dan Arrow, and also if this is bringing more attention to them, and
they're doing it to get an audience.
That's actually exactly my question, Armin.
Okay, sorry.
If these shoe on head, armored skeptics, Sargon, are just doing everything for clicks, and I agree with you, they are just looking for clicks.
I mean, that's a suspicion. I can't read their minds, but it's...
Well, you know what? I don't know.
Yeah.
But from what I've seen from that video of Sargon's, I'm not...
Oh, yeah.
I'm not contesting that.
Yeah. Do we need this sort of injection of fresh sort of controversy and electricity into the movement kind of thing?
Right. But I feel like people like that have been mentioned, like Dan Arrow and Steve Shives or whatever his name is, or all of these, YouTube, they're the same sort of thing. They're just on the internet going, you're a racist, you're a bigot, you're an Islamophobe. You're like finding all sorts of reasons. Ex-Muslims are Nazis, right? Like ex-Muslims are racists. I've seen those people calling Ayaan Hirsi Ali racist. Yeah. Like those people are, you know, they're nut jobs.
Sam Harris, you know, and his
exactly. Yeah.
And I'm like, come on.
So they're just pointing at everybody and calling, you know, looking for, they're doing the exact same thing where they're just looking for
the game
drama.
in their favor. Because if you say you're hurting honest criticism and you are hurting discussions about people who have genuinely been hurt by bigotry and misogyny and discrimination and abuse, because you're cheating them because you are now building this mountain of hyperbole and exaggeration and fear mongering on what would have been a legitimate thing for us to discuss. You know, when Dan calls the hotel, he called the MythCon hotel and freaks the people out that, hey, you know, that there's going to be some dangerous people there. And they were so weirded out that MythCon now has to pay for extra security, which I think to myself, where are the repercussions? Is that a responsible way to approach this kind of thing? They got some YouTube shock jocks with some pretty unfortunate ideas, but it's not going to be freaking Thunderdome. And while they're there, you got Faisal Saeed Al-Muhtar, and you've got Melissa Chen, and you've got Matt Dillahunty, and you've got Thomas Smith, and you've got all these other people there. You know, it's not going to be a cage match. There will be some conversation that takes place. Yeah. And there's been a peace pledge that's been put out by MythCon that everybody signed to say that this will be a respectful environment. So even if they brought in some shitty people, it's their right to do so. And this escalation, this gleeful escalation to me, I can only think that they're either only happy when they're miserable or they're seeking relevance by stirring drama and tarring and feathering good people. When someone calls Matt Dillahunty a rape apologist or a Nazi sympathizer, you know that we are no longer operating in reality. We have checked out of the hotel reality. We are now off in Xanadu land somewhere. We are not operating in good faith or with any real grounding. Those people, in my mind, I think can just be discounted. I'll just write them off. Like you have just withdrawn your own voice from the conversation.
So they weren't the reason that you decided to withdraw from the conference, and it wasn't because of them alerting you to these YouTubers?
Well, let me give you the backstory. Steve Shives was a guy I'd interviewed 3 years ago, and he and Sargon have a long history, and a nasty one. When I posted Steve Shives' interview video, there were thousands of dislikes. I mean, they just descended. It was a disproportionate amount of negative energy that sort of came onto my page from these people who were like, Steve Shives, and they were all, and it went on for, I must have gone on for a month or more. And I left the video up. I didn't delete or ban anybody. I thought, and I still think to this day, despite the fact that, you know, I think Steve considers me a persona non grata, the interview deserves to be heard. And did I go then and get into the online squabble that he's had? Do I really, is it my job to go and find out exactly who every freaking YouTuber is that everybody gets into a fight with online? Hell no. And so I think Steve was stung by the fact that I didn't just take his word for it. Ultimately, it wasn't about Sargon of Akkad. It was about MythCon's right to invite whoever they want. Naively, I thought that they, you know, I didn't think they'd shoot themselves in the foot with these particular three. But I think they're upset that, hey, we told you at the very beginning and you didn't listen. And now here you are months later, finally coming to agree with us. And yet you continue to berate us online.
Some people in our live chat are defending the YouTubers, and I think they like their content, and they're asking me to ask you if you watched their content, you know, a lot of their content when you decided that they are not worthy or they're not good people to listen to.
I honestly didn't know them. And I really overall still don't know a lot about them beyond the cursory amount of content that I sought out when I finally got serious. I will say, and I know they're not going to accept the answer, I'll say it only took a toe in the ocean for me to realize that these are not the kind of producers, content producers, voices, activists that I want to support. It was immediately apparent that their content is either lazy, hazy, or it's poorly done, it's not well thought out, or it's just unnecessarily caustic and hurtful to people, especially Sargon. He is a provocateur in a negative sense, you know, and I think he thrives on the attention, and it's working for him. He's got 600,000+ YouTube subscribers. His model works for him, but you know, it's not my flavor of activist, and I don't care much at all.
Unfortunately, it's the same model that Steve Shives and Dan Arrow and those ilk have as well.
Yeah, I actually learned about him in a really weird way, because I had no idea who he was. Again, the whole YouTuber thing is just a whole different world. Then there was this guy in the Saudi guy who asked me to be on a podcast, and then this Sargon guy showed up too, and you know, we had a nice conversation. I think he was trying to convince me that it's a good idea to go out and convert all Muslims on the internet to Christianity, or you know, something like that, something weird. But anyway, we had a conversation that ended, but I didn't know who he was until then. So I actually first got to know about him after actually being on a podcast with him. But that video that I talked about and that you posted, you know, we'll put that in the description as well, just so people have some context as to what you're talking about. And it's not about, because obviously all of these people have ideas that they've put out that other people agree with. I'm sure that I'll read stuff in it, and I read the Bible, and there's some things I read in the Bible, and I'm like, oh, that's good.
It's about content.
It's not about that. It's
about attitude. My favorite claim, Ali, is, well, you as a conference attendee have a responsibility to know all the proper things about the people who are on the docket. You got to be shitting me. I do conferences all over the freaking country. There are people, I will go to the conference and I'm like, I don't know who they are. I don't know what books you've written. I don't know what your platform is, but I, at some point, am at the pleasure of my hosts. I'm not going because of them. My appearance there is not an endorsement or enabling of them. I'm not really in any important way other than attending the event connected to them. I'm going to give content and to do what I do, to present the message that I brought to the table. In this weird fantasy that people have that, well, you have a responsibility to go out and fully peruse the long libraries of everybody on the list. And if you don't, you haven't done due diligence or living in a fantasy.
Yeah, and read every tweet they've ever tweeted over the past 5 years. It's a bizarre thinking. I saw enough in my own life, and I saw the controversy blow up. And I'll make this known again, folks. You know, I would like to think that people would become a little better at charitable listening. When somebody approaches something like this, I think it's so telling when you see how quickly the online trolls will turn on you. You can see the people who will operate in good faith and be charitable and say, well, yeah, you know, it could have been better. You made a couple of mistakes. You tried to make it right. We get it. It's unfortunate. You live and you learn. I mean, that's how we would approach each other usually in real life, family members, friends, associates, coworkers. Online, people are waiting, desperate for you to make a mistake or to make a bad call or what they perceive as a mistake.
Or whatever, right? Because now they come after you. And as they claw at your coattails, it builds their ego. It builds their sense of relevance. For many people, drama is their calling card. It is all they do. It's all they know. There is an outrage brigade. There is a whole culture, a microcosm of malcontents that do nothing but bitch and moan and see the worst and fearmonger. And I'm just tired. I'm just tired of listening to their voices.
So speaking of the microcosm of malcontent, and I really like that as well.
Well said, Seth.
Outrage brigade. So let's move on to this this other side about the atheist movement in general. So, you know, there was a time, the good old days, when it was like a small budding movement. You know, you had these 4 books that came out. You had the New Atheists, and there was from my point of view, it was a rejuvenation of the whole atheist movement that they called New Atheism. You were actually a very, very inspiring figure to a lot of us. You've been in it for a very long time. Same thing with Matt Delonte and a lot of these other guys. Now it's obviously different. A lot of the stuff that you're seeing, that you're talking about, that's both on the left with all of the sort of, calling the hotel and saying there's going to be violence there, and
well,
also,
I don't know if they said there'd be violence, but I mean they were warning that something really horrible might happen.
Horrible, yeah. So like that kind of thing, and then on the other side you have, all the people, the whole Sargon type thing, and a lot of this stuff actually did come out of the atheism, the new atheist movement. These people got their start there. A lot of people like Sam Harris himself has said that he was shocked to find out, I think when the whole Trump movement was happening, he was shocked to find out how many supporters he had that he didn't find, that he found very unsavory. I mean, he's actually talked about it, and he was surprised. I personally was surprised too to find out a lot of my followers were like this as well. So do you think this is an actual thing? This is a real thing that's happening in the atheist movement? Do you think there is do you think there's any association with it? Like, how would you characterize it?
Well, there are a few things at play, and this is just conjecture, but I mean, I do a lot of this, so I may stumble across a grain of truth here or there. I think there's some familiarity breeds contempt. So now that the atheist movement it's grown and it's kind of been, the engine's been running, and we've seen the familiar faces and the four horsemen are kind of blasé and all those things, people are now beginning to turn on the very things that they used to embrace. There's several elements to that. Some people think, oh, it's too popular, it's too mainstream. I liked it back when I could keep it in my back pocket, kind of thing. I think one thing we've always known is that just because you're an atheist doesn't mean you're a good person, doesn't mean you're a rationalist, doesn't mean you're a humanist. It doesn't mean you're not a bigot or an awful human being. I mean, you just don't believe in God. It doesn't guarantee anything else. And so now our tent is growing, right? We see the rise of secularism in the United States and in key parts of the world, and you're seeing the popularity of the non-religious or the nuns, and so these numbers grow. Well, with the good, you're going to see a growth of the tremendously awful. And then you may have a point that with Donald Trump in office and this sort of liberated feeling by many of the alt-right, that there's an element of that now feels freer to speak and to spread its wings and to be vocal. And many of those people very well might be atheists, and they have to be spoken out and spoken against, for sure.
Mm-hmm. But isn't that I think that's a good thing, that we're finding atheists that we dislike or disagree with, or even because I think part of what we try to do at the atheist movement is to normalize atheism. That includes the inferiority and the demonizing of atheists. We're trying to reduce that, but I also think that we need to, within the atheist community, the sense of superiority, or the fact that, oh, I thought atheists were supposed to be more intelligent. Well, who told you that? Like, it's good that you're saying that you don't start just like when you see an atheist as a Christian, you shouldn't assume that they're not moral. As an atheist, when you see another atheist, you shouldn't just assume that they're better because they're an atheist. So I think introducing atheists to other atheists that are not thinking like them, it's a good way to show them that this. I'm happy that they're being exposed to that. Like, that's why on Atheist Republic, when we see a homophobe or a racist atheist, I try to advocate for not banning them, so other atheists see that there's nothing superior. Our message is that we are the same as you, so we shouldn't over adjust that by trying to say that we are better than you. Just like the gay rights movement. Like, I'm also against it when some people say, like, oh, I think I like gay people and I think they're all this and this. No, the point of the gay rights movement is to say, like, we are the same. If you try to over adjust it and say they're all great, you're actually going to hurt the movement, because when you know what I mean, every group has its share of idiots or homophobes or racists or people that are good people that you might just disagree with. And I think it's a good thing that we're being exposed to that.
I'm terrified of disagreeing with Armin because he hosts the most popular atheist website in the world and has resources well beyond any of our knowledge. World domination is within his grasp. And so I say this at my own peril, but I see it a little bit differently. You know, atheism, I want us to be in the excellence business. I want the best ideas to win. I mean, I think about myself, Armin, when I was, you know, it was 10 years ago and I was coming out of the faith and my whole life had been turned upside down. And I was afraid of losing my family and would I lose my job? And because my employers were Christian and my whole life had just been changed. And I was online YouTubing and Googling and atheist and what is atheism and stumbling upon people who helped to inform my initial attitudes and opinions about what non-belief and non-believers might be. For me, it was Christopher Hitchens and a few others. Now imagine, you know, someone's going through that same journey and the first person they stumble upon on YouTube in a search is somebody who is an alt-right hater, someone who's using the N-word flippantly, and someone who's just manifesting some pretty toxic attitudes or just a recklessness or what have you. I mean, I would like them to stumble upon Atheist Republic much more than I would like them to stumble upon some other sort of YouTube controversy for clicks thing. I would like us to cultivate the best. Having said that, I do think it's important for us to acknowledge that, you know, atheism is not a guarantee that we have all the answers, and atheism isn't a magic pill, and that we here in the atheist movement will listen and we will do our best to not vilify everybody with a dissenting opinion, and we're not going to become censors. And ultimately, we are confident enough in the best ideas that we have we really do believe that the best ideas will win the day. That might be, some people think that might be childish and sort of utopian, but I really do think the best, you know, what's that saying that says the key to bad speech? More speech. I really do feel that's the case. It's, you know, one of those things where I'd like to see the bad ideas marginalized, but they have every right to be marginal.
Right. But I think there are different movements here. I think, like, for example, challenging superstition and everything, that's like part of the skeptic movement, and the atheist movement and the skeptic movement and the humanist movement. Sometimes they have parts that are the same, but I do think that the main thing about the atheist movement is normalizing atheism and accepting, you know, atheists. And so, for example, in an example, you gave an example, and I think one example, imagine if somebody's living in Islam and they're considering, you know, maybe that they don't believe in all this stuff, but they still have some homophobia in them, right? And the thing is that we need to welcome this person because, you know, because we can't reject them because of the fact that they're homophobic, because, you know, everybody, no matter how wrong they are, they shouldn't be demonized for the fact that they're atheists, right? So
I totally agree. I'm just talking about the people that we place in the most public positions as our representatives, you know.
But can we, like Lala is pointing, how could we control that?
Well, I ultimately, it still comes back to speech. I get to control who I associate with, who I populate my channel with, who I engage, who I platform, who I put behind a microphone or on a podium somewhere. And I'm all about engaging with even bad ideas. I really am. That's why I had Dan Errol on. I knew Dan's positions before we spoke. We had a respectful 35 minutes. It epitomized free speech between, you know, two really opposing points of view. But I, at the time, didn't feel like that, you know, Dan was going to grab the audio of whatever we had done and use it in some bad faith way, or he was going to, that he was only in it for the clicks. I mean, I felt like this is a discussion that was worth having. So I've got people on my pages that have some unfortunate ideas. Hell, I've had some unfortunate ideas in my life. But if I know you are unfortunate, I know you're spewing some pretty awful stuff. Are you the guy that I put out there and say, hey, folks, you know, reject religion because we have all this amazing stuff here at our party, and then I put an awful person on the podium? That becomes really problematic, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we're up against religion, basically. The atheist movement right now, like Ali was saying, is still, you know, with the new atheists, whatever that means, it's pretty new and fragile, and we kind of hit a lull, and we're trying to, you know, get ourselves back up again. But, you know, when we're up against religion, which is so established and savvy and smart, and you know, we can't just throw anybody forward to be our leaders. We have to think carefully about what we're doing and and understand that we're going to have we're going to have people that are going to be questioning their faith, looking to us for support or guidance. And if they're going to see things that are going to be extremely unfortunate, it's only going to catapult them back and say, well, actually, they were right. Those atheists are immoral. They probably eat babies too. You know what I mean? Like, we're just going to be
look at how they treat people. Look at how they speak about people.
Yes, I think that.
I'm sorry. What was that, Seth?
No. Go ahead. I was just murmuring. That's what I do. I interrupted you and Ali. Go ahead.
No.
Sorry, I actually interrupted. But no, yes. One of the things was, I think, Armin, you said somebody was saying how to control it. Like that, how can you control that? So
right.
That is one of the things when I mean, the positive spin on this is that anytime you have something that grows big, when the you know, the tent becomes bigger and the more and more people come in, and then you know, the disagreements, and even, I guess, for lack of a better term, the sectarianism that comes later, is actually, it's a symptom of a growing, burgeoning movement. So you know, usually if everybody thinks the same, that usually happens in the infancy of something. When it grows big, there's something that, okay, there's different points of view, and there's great people there and there's horrible people there, and there is a question of who should come up front. Everybody's going to be competing to come up front. I think that's where I actually agree with what you're saying, Seth, and I actually believe this too, is that I think the good ideas ultimately win in the end. I think that you have backlashes. You sometimes have 2 steps forward, 1 step back. That happens, but ultimately, I think the stuff that makes more sense, the stuff that people relate to more, the stuff that's compelling is the stuff that wins out.
Right. So if good ideas win, then we don't really have to control it. We should just let everything fight, and then the good ones will win.
This sounds like the Road Warrior to me. It just sounds like an apocalypse where everybody's shooting each other over 5 gallons of gas. You know, it just sounds like. I want to, if I may, I know one problem with having a radio host as a guest is I tend to have long-winded answers. So please forgive me.
No, that's the thing with podcasts.
We want that.
I wanted to cover a couple of things that have come up and we glanced over, and I kind of mentally planted a flag there, and I want to come back to it. One is that the movement is in this weird lull. Yasmin just mentioned it again, and she's right. We've had the mythicist Milwaukee guys were talking about how conference attendance is down, and people aren't attending, and there isn't as much excitement and whatnot. And I want to address that if I can. Again, I probably do 35 speaking dates a year. Some are major conventions. A lot of them are individual tour stops. You're seeing the standard conference model wane. You know, people don't want to spend $500-700 on a weekend necessarily and go. Most people can't afford to go and bring out them and the kids and get the hotel and pay for the meals and the banquets. And, you know, it's just prohibitive for a lot of people. There are, some of it speaks to, I've seen lineups where they won't even have a keynote. There's no one on, they have a lot of PhD types on the roster, but they don't have anyone that audience members have a relationship with. You know, it's not like, oh, I can't wait to see Dr. So-and-so who taught a class at the University of X on the biology of the bumblebee, blah, blah. I mean, you just don't see these people going. People often attend conferences. They want to get new and fresh ideas. They want to learn stuff, but mostly they want to connect. And that includes connection with the speakers. And so we need to do a better job of populating our conferences with speakers that have relationships with their audiences. And I will say that I don't think the conferences in certain models are waning. Hell, we did the 300th radio broadcast live in Dallas, Texas, in front of an audience of 370 people. Well, that's more than some of the national conferences get. I do speaking tour stops individually around the country, and we'll fill the place up. I think if you bring the right stuff and you bring a sense of community and goodwill and fun and quality and storytelling and all those things, people will come and they'll show up. I think it's just many conference organizers need to understand the power of community building and relationship storytelling, building a weekend or a day that people can afford financially, but also speaks to them in their mind and their heart. And I think you'll begin to really see those numbers start to go back up. So I just kind of wanted to camp out there for just a second.
But I also think that the audience is finding their content in different ways these days, right? Like, I think a lot of it is, I mean, we might, conference-wise, we might be going down, but online, we're growing faster than ever. I think if people are just consuming content in a different way, they feel like, why would I have to go to a conference when I could listen to these people on their podcasts every week? I mean, we get more audience in every episode than any of these conferences that we ever go to. I mean, like the secular, we just started a podcast, and within the 24th episode, we already had, I just checked, 165,000 downloads worldwide. The Atheist Republic is growing between 5,000 to 10,000 new followers a week. So, and this has never been this fast. So your show, I'm pretty sure the numbers are growing. Then, you know, I just think, like, if you look at, people just think because content is so easily accessible, that might be one reason why conferences are less popular, because
it might be. But Armin, let me tell you, you and I are talking here from different parts of the world, but there's nothing like you and I seeing each other at an event. Big hug, how's it been? Good to see you. We hang out, we have a drink, we talk, we're having that sort of one-on-one thing. You know, let's having dinner together. I mean, I understand and I agree. I think that people are getting their content, and community comes in many forms, but there's no substitute. I mean, many of these people have left community when they left their religious organizations. They left that structure. They left the people. They left the music. They left people missing them when they weren't there. And so when they're craving the opportunity to go and have a one-on-one in-person connection with other people, I think that still has merit. So.
Yeah, I noticed that in all the conferences, like even when I speak, I mean, people are just there they want to connect with it. A lot of people, as you said, have left their families behind. For many of them actually come up and say, this is my family.
Yeah.
You know, this is where
I'm guilty.
That's true. I'm not saying that's not true. I'm just saying it might be just a little bit less than before, given that how easily people get their content. It just might be, it's still there, and some people just want to see, you know, Seth Andrews, just want to, you know, I'm one of them, right? You know, so I want to see Seth Andrews in person wherever he's speaking. So, but I'm just thinking less people are like that than before.
Yeah, well, and there may be some fatigue there. Maybe, you know, once you've seen, you know, hey, I've seen that guy speak 5 times before, so I don't need to go again. There may be some of that, you know, that may have merit.
I think it's more. I think what Armin's talking about more is the whole Netflix effect. Like now you can. You know, you can, you know, why would you go to the theater when you have so many things to, you know, watch right here at home? And you've got home theater systems, and the technology is really great. You've got projection, you've got huge flat screen TVs. So, you know, let's just stay home, and you know, it's cold outside, and instead of going to the theater. So that's why theater attendance is down too. And it's obviously,
I'm biased too. I think probably I spend almost all my time alone in a studio, right? Yeah. And all my family's religious. Most of my friends are religious. My wife's religious. I crave the opportunity to get out and be with people who don't think I'm going through midlife or to hell. You know, either I'll take either one of those. Let's go do that. So I probably bring some bias to my exploration of that subject.
Yeah. Yaz, you had a question?
Yeah. So Seth, since you're sitting here with 3 ex-Muslims, I want to bring this back to Islam. So you you had a conversation with all of us and our 4th jihadi who's missing today. And you spoke with all of us, and you spoke with Muhammad Sayed and Sarah Hayter too. And you got to hear from us, and we got to hear from you a little bit in your conclusion, which I loved it. I don't know if I told you this, but I was listening to it in the car, and I just I was like hollering, yes! I was so happy.
Can you mention that episode so that people know what we're talking about? That episode of The Thinking Atheist about radical Islam.
I can send you the link. I'm trying to recall what I can't remember what I titled it. We've done several shows on Islam, but it was a show I think we did was it the spring of this year?
Yeah, it was the spring of this year, and
I think it was the summer. But yeah, it was the summer. It was all of us. All of us were on it. I think the interviews you may have done at different times, but as Yaz said, yeah, there was Yaz, it was me.
Clips of all of us.
While you're speaking, I can look it up for you and give everybody a title, and then send you a link if you would like it. So
sure, we'd love that. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I really loved the conclusion, and I felt like you totally got what we were all trying to say. You totally hit the nail on the head, and it was, it made me really happy. But intimately, because you grew up being a devout Christian, and you mentioned your wife, and you've got family members, and so you understand what Christian people are like in America, and you understand what liberal people are like in America, and we were able to get through to you. But there are a lot of people who you would assume would be our natural allies, like people that have struggled to get out of Christianity. Like one of my really good friends grew up Catholic. He went to Catholic schools. He hated it. He talks about it with nothing but contempt and anger now. But whenever I say anything about Islam, he gets really uncomfortable. And he tells me that I'm being, overly obnoxious. And it's, it's not necessary. Yeah.
As opposed to just obnoxious. You're overly obnoxious, Yasmin.
It's just like his white guilt takes over, and he just can't handle it, right? So my question to you is, like, what is the language that we can use to get through to our fellow liberals? Like, how did we get through to you? Yeah, help me out here.
Well, by the way, the show aired on May the 27th of this year. It's called What is Radical Islam? I'll send you guys the link if you want to put that in the description box of whatever.
I found it. I just sent it to our live chat people as well.
Yeah. And I'm so hugely proud of that show, because mostly I got to bring on amazing and compelling guests, and then I just sat back and listened, which is what a clever host will do, right? I get to take credit for you and all your moves and wisdom. Well, it's funny. I even now, Islam is like it's a minefield for me, because I know I have a cursory knowledge of it, obviously, because we talk about religion and it's one of the major three. For me, I think my biggest challenge here is when Islam comes up or Muslims come up in Oklahoma. Okay, we're in the buckle of the Bible Belt. We're in Jesus Town. Okay, Jesus Town. I can't even tell you where a mosque is in this town. I think there's one downtown Tulsa. If you see someone who is obviously any flavor of Muslim, it's a kind of a thing. Like, oh, look, look, there's one in the wild, right? Because we just don't.
All of a sudden, you hear Attenborough's voice.
Get the camcorder, So when you're dealing with a monumental level of ignorance by a population that doesn't even know its own religious tenets. It doesn't know its own Bible. It doesn't know really most of its own verses. It doesn't know the origins of the doctrine and the dogma. So they can't even get their head around the stuff they're going to church to say is absolutely true every Sunday. Islam, to them, it's overwhelming. Islam is over there. Islam is that place. Islam is over on the other side of the world. And Islam, for many, is a skin color.
Yeah.
They don't differentiate between Islam and Muslim, like the cultural Muslim. They don't understand. I told someone just the other day, they were talking about ISIS and these tremendously horrible theocratic regimes that were beheading and raping and whatnot. And they were like, it's just horrible. I hope they don't come over here, and we got to do something. And it was almost Trumpian the way they were speaking. And I'm like, you realize the vast majority of the people who are oppressed by ISIS are themselves Muslims. And they looked at me like, they looked like one of those trees in the Wizard of Oz. It was like, I mean, their whole face just got twisted up. Like, how can Muslims be persecuted by Muslims? I'm just like, and that's what we're up against. You are up against a monumental cultural ignorance where they want it simple. And I think this is why Trump is popular, right? This is why Trump's popular. It's us and them. And I'll fix it with one fell swoop. What did he say during the campaign? I alone can fix it. And so they say, fine, finally, our white knight, literally, our white knight is here to save the day. We can go off to our beer and bingo and do whatever it is we're doing. And someone else is going to handle this really messy Islamic problem, whatever that is. So I think we have to start by educating and humanizing the Muslim. And I think that comes through relationships and conversation and discussion. You're not going to drag any of these people to a mosque. You know, for me, it was conversations with Muslims. You know, when I first started doing the radio show, I had Miriam Namazi on. We were talking about the work she does, and I became an immediate fan, right? I'm like, I love that woman. And it's added so much more depth, and I began to see that these human beings who are under the boot of radical Islam, and it brought it all home to me. And the conversations I have with you guys continued to feed into that. So I think we have to do a better job of educating and humanizing when it comes to Muslims and Islam and the many shades of how people believe and hold on to their cultures and what's radical, what's moderate, all those types of things.
Yeah, I think it's also, you know, when people look at us, like if we went into one of those, I mean, I did a tour with my brother. He's a musician, about 5 years ago now. And we drove right across the U.S. and we went to some really, really rural areas, you know, for gas and to pick up sandwiches. And there's some places we went to, they're just kind of looking at us. And I looked at it, I was like, to these people, I can go out and I can say I'm an atheist. I can say anything, you know, I don't believe. I'm always going to be Muslim to them. So it goes to kind of what you're saying. And the second thing is when I was when I initially was shopping the book proposal and I titled the book The Atheist Muslim, one of the first agents I talked to, he's like, oh, this title's got to change. Because it's, you know, most people, when they look at atheists, most people in America, they'll be like, oh, atheist, godless, evil, immoral. And they look at Muslim, they're like, oh, those jihadist, terrorist motherfuckers. And it's basically
double shit.
Yeah, it's basically a double whammy. They just look at this and be double disgusted. So, and then the second agent I went to and one I eventually went with loved the title. So it's a, you know, it is. I became very familiar with the way that people think of, you know, just these terms and how they trigger them. The question, I guess, for me to follow up on what Yas said is that how do you square that? How do you square, like, you know, you want to normalize or you want to humanize Muslims, but we also want to critically scrutinize Islam and talk about it the way that you talk about Christianity.
Yeah. For me, it comes, in many ways, comes back to, it's hugely oversimplified to say they're just people. I mean, they're good Christians, they're horrible Christians, they're good atheists, they're horrible. They're good Muslims, they're horrible Muslims. Who was it? I think it was Armin once in the interview that we did was talking about one thing that's not often said, and this is not popular in many circles, but when somebody straps a suicide vest and goes into a nightclub in Orlando or wherever and kills 80 people, people talk about the victims, but they never mention the other victim, which was the person who was so damaged in his mind and his perceptions and so filled, so indoctrinated with hate and with just horrific ideas. You know, this person was in many ways also a victim. Now, I'm not saying that, you know, we shouldn't use whatever force is necessary to keep them from harming our fellow men and women and children, but we have to see that these horrible ideas, the power of theocratic regimes and indoctrination and superstition and all these other things that come into play, they make everybody a victim. And I think, I don't know. I mean, I would lean to you guys more on, you know, how do you deal with the problem of the radical I don't know the answer. I think it in my own mind, I've only come to one conclusion, which is if you see the radical about to commit or threatening to commit a deadly act overtly, we have no choice but to protect the innocent and those who are, and if that means lethal force, then so be it. But at the end of the day, I think, you're only swatting at the symptom. I think we have to find a way somehow to counter the superstition itself and these theocratic governments and all this insanity so that the root of the problem is sort of fixed. And how that's done, I mean, that's for wiser people than me. So.
Well, this is why, when you say we need to humanize Muslims and we ask how do we fight Islam while humanizing Muslims, my response is that we need to humanize Muslims because we want to fight Islam. Because what is fighting Islam? The only way you could fight Islam is to convince more Muslims to abandon Islam. You can't convince Muslims to abandon Islam without actually befriending Muslims. Yeah. Right? You can't, the only way to convince people of their ideology is first to be able to talk. Nobody's going to listen to you if you just shout at them and tell them they're idiots and that they're, so, they're both in the same direction. The most effective way of fighting Islam is to be nice to Muslims, right?
That's back to actually changing social circles. Ryan Cragen at the University of Tampa did some research, and he's like, much more than any YouTube channel or any more than any speech or any book. What changes people's minds is changing their social circle. I mean, how many times have I known somebody who would have they'd never hung out with an atheist, but they hung out with me and found out later I was an atheist. They saw me as a human being first. And then I'd already messed up their categories and they couldn't reject the atheist because they'd already enjoyed Seth the guy. And, humanizing each other and developing human relationships. And that's why I hugely resist the idea that we must agree to be able to be friends. People will ask me, well, Seth, how can you be married to someone who believes in God? And I'm like, I don't love her because she believes in God. I love her because she's awesome. Because she's a beautiful person. We have disagreements, but I saw her as a human being and I loved what I saw. And that's hard for some people to get their head around, I think. You know what I'm curious about, Armin? I'm curious if Ali and Yasmin agree with you that it's a waste of time to try to moderate Islam and you have to eliminate Islam. Have you taken a lot of heat for that particular line? It was interesting to hear you articulate it.
So here's the thing. Eliminating Islam is not feasible. When I say getting rid of Islam, I'm talking about individual wins, right?
Okay, all right.
I'm not talking about like when I say the only way to reform Islam is to get rid of Islam, I'm not talking about completely removing Islam, because that's a goal that we're not gonna achieve, not within my lifetime at least, right? When I'm saying getting rid of Islam, people are like, how are you going to convince 1.6 billion people to leave Islam? I'm like, who set that goal? I'm talking at one person's life not being wasted to Islam, that's a win. And guess what? We have managed thousands, and that's a huge win. We're not talking about the entire Islamic community. But
I saw the wisdom in it. I mean, it's easy rather than try to rationalize or moderate or water down and sort of a nonsensical story. It's still nonsensical. It's actually easier to walk away outright. I understand in principle, but I was curious if your fellow co-hosts lined up with you on that or not. I don't know.
I'll let them speak.
Well, I've decided life is too short to argue with Armin. So.
No, that's not the reason.
No, I'm just kidding. But actually, I wanted to talk about that point you made, Seth, about.
But can you respond to what he said first? Like,
is it easier? Is it a waste of time to? I don't even know. Waste of time's right. Should we try to moderate Islam so it's less lethal or less problematic, or to try to eliminate it?
I would respond to that the same way I would respond to any irrational beliefs, whether it's flat earthers or climate change deniers or religious people. It doesn't matter to me. Racist people, anybody that has any irrational beliefs. Yes, of course, I would prefer to have a planet where, everybody only believed in things that had evidence and everybody was rational. And yeah, sure, that would be fantastic. But I know that's never going to happen. I know that we're not rational animals. Atheists have always been the fringe of society. we've always been the smallest. You know, we're growing these days because people aren't killing us quite as often. But you know, it's more popular for people to have their comfortable lies than their uncomfortable truths. People just prefer it. So I don't think that it's realistic. But if I have a choice between hanging out with somebody like Bin Laden or hanging out with somebody like Maj Nawaz or Astronomani, the choice is obvious, you know? So some people said to me, oh, so are you saying it's like the lesser of the two evils? Well, yeah, it is. You know,
but I would respond to that.
But let me just finish my thought.
Sorry.
Same thing with, you know, if we're talking about like anti-vaxxers or racists, for example, like sometimes those things can be hurtful. So we can't stop people from being racist, but we can put laws in place and regulations in place to prevent those people from causing harm to others. So I view religious people in the same sort of way. If you want to have whatever beliefs you want to have, that's fine. But as long as you keep your beliefs away from the public sphere, keep it out of education, keep it out of government, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I know the natural thing that's going to happen, which probably Armin was already ready to say, is what about children? And he's right. We do. Every person that has, you know, dangerous beliefs is most likely passing them on to their kid. But if we keep these dangerous beliefs as much as possible out of the public sphere and out of education, then at least we're giving those children an opportunity to hear a counter narrative. But I did want to also just continue this a little bit further, because when you were talking about walking around and not seeing any other, like not seeing any Muslims anywhere, that's what it's like in the Muslim world. It's 90% Muslims. They get told from, you know, as soon as they can understand language, how bad Jews are and how bad non-Muslims are and how bad idol worshippers are, but they've never met any of these people. So it's really easy to have them in their head as like this boogeyman. Yeah. And so the same is true on the other side of the planet too. And I think that's why having because I was born and raised here in Canada, all of these messages didn't stick with me as strongly as they would have stuck with me if I were living in a community where my education and media and everything was all confirming this same narrative. There were counter narratives all the time. I was just at the grocery store, or at the pharmacy, or in traffic. You're meeting non-Muslims and they're actually really nice people. You know, my friends, I love them. They're non-Muslims. So I was just sort of like bringing that all together. Now, I don't know if I can continue and ask the question, Armin, or you want Ali to respond to the reform question.
I'm okay with either way.
You're scared now to.
I sometimes interrupt yes, and I always regret it. Sorry, yes.
I'll respond really, really quickly so we can, because I want Yas to continue to the next thing, but I'll just respond. I actually, for me, I think Yas put it really well. That anytime there's a belief that's false, I think we should talk about it. And one of the things I actually think there's overlap. I mean, a lot of the Enlightenment that happened, which moderated Christianity, was actually brought about by people who were deists and atheists. They weren't reformers. You know, they didn't. I mean, you had the Reformation was, you know, Martin Luther and all those guys. But then later on, eventually, you know, you have people like John Locke and people like Thomas Jefferson, people like Voltaire and Rousseau. I mean, these were people who went out and they just said that, you know, they didn't believe, and they talked about it, and that kind of moderated things. So I think that if we go out and we just talk about things being false, that does have a moderating effect in itself. Do I think that it should be eliminated? Yeah, I think that all bad ideas should be eliminated. I think Islam's a very bad idea. I think all religions are just bad ideas. And another thing I want to say is that, you know, when we say that there's some people who say, well, jihadism is the problem, it's not Islam, Islam's fine, and I think we all agree that that's wrong. I mean, jihadism, you can't speak about jihadism and criticize it without criticizing Islam. But you zoom out further and you realize that, you know, the same thing goes with religious faith. You can't talk about Islam, criticize Islam, without actually talking about how toxic the idea of religious faith, which by definition is believing things without evidence, and how toxic that is. So, and this is one of the things I did. I had this exchange with a Taliban supporter after the bombing and after the shooting in Peshawar, Pakistan, in my home country, Pakistan, when they went and they shot dead 132 children between the ages of 12 and 14 in an army school back in 2014. And when I talked to him, he was defending it by saying the same things that, you know, we'd all grown up with. He said, well, you know, death isn't permanent. They're in a better place now. Like, you guys, your faith is not pure, and that's why you think death is an end. But death isn't an end. You know, and they said the same thing that Armin thought when he was younger, that they died under the age of 15, so they're all automatically going to heaven. If they grew up and they you know, lived to be adults, they would be sinners, and there's a potential they could go to hell. He was saying all of the same stuff that we're told. You know, he's in a better place. They're looking down on us from above. Everything that we're told, that all of us were told growing up. He was using that same stuff, but he actually believed in it. So the problem isn't just, you know, Islam or jihad or, you know, Christianity or anything. It's just the idea of faith. And sorry, this is becoming more long-winded than I thought, but the last thing I want to say is when I was in Saudi Arabia, I was in a fundamentalist Islamic country, the most conservative Salafist Islamic country in the world. I was in a Muslim family, and I was going to an American school. So I was in this sort of cocoon surrounded by all of these sort of insulation layers. And our science teacher showed us the Carl Sagan Cosmos series when I was in 5th grade. That broke through. That broke through that country. It broke through the upbringing I had in my family, and it actually got to me. It didn't make me an atheist immediately, but it set me on that path. I learned about critical thinking. I learned about science. I learned about falsifiability. You know, I learned about empiricism. So many these basic concepts at the age of 10 are what I did through all of those layers, right? And I think that when we talk about that, when we talk about these ideas, and again, teaching people how to think rather than what to think, and that's how we deal with kids. It doesn't matter what family they're born in. It doesn't matter where they're growing up. Of course, all those things make a difference. But that's the stuff that's really, really powerful. That can go through. We talk about our goals, like, you know, what we're going to do about immigration. Are we going to keep them out? Are we going to vet this, vet that? What matters, I think, ultimately is not the goal, but the process, the tools that you're going to use in the process. And that all starts early. And anyway, Yaz, go ahead. That wasn't a short answer. But.
You should do an altar call after that. I mean, that was really impressive. No, it's actually pretty profound, and I think it speaks again to humanizing. You know, if we humanize each other, it makes it a more personal mission. So forgive me. Go ahead, yeah. Yasmin.
No, it's actually continuing from that. So about humanizing, did you ever have this issue when you were talking about Christianity? Did you ever have people saying to you, oh, can you separate Christians from Christianity, and you're now being Christianophobic and you're offending Christians and you're hurting them, and now Christians are going to they're going to, you know, put on suicide vests now because you've instigated this by talking about their religion? You know, was any of this a problem for you when you were talking about Christianity?
Never. And no one ever said, you know, by criticizing Christianity, you're radicalizing them and you're making them hate you. And it's your fault when they turn on you. It never happened. No.
because I feel like it's such a big deal. Like we talk so much about it. We're so careful all the time. Oh, we need to humanize Muslims. We need to treat Muslims like human beings. We need to make sure that when we criticize Islam, that we're not criticizing Muslims. I feel like that's really condescending and it's insulting, actually. You know, like people like this, you know, all the Muslims that are being killed in the Rohingya Muslims in Burma, and people are like, asking us if we're okay with the genocide of human beings. I'm like,
what are your feelings, Yasmin, about the genocide in Burma? Yeah, and you're like, it's almost like one of those dumbass reporter questions. You know, after Hurricane Irma, they go to someone who's lost everything they've ever owned, and they say, "What are you feeling right now?" I'm like, what do you think they're feeling right now? You know? So I understand completely.
It's we're too overly concerned and consumed with worrying about making sure that we don't offend Muslims as we tell them all the problems with their religion. Well, of course they're going to be offended. They're Muslims. Same when we talk about Christianity, I'm sure Christians were offended too, but nobody was running in circles around themselves trying not to offend Christians. You know, everybody just went ahead and said what needed to be said.
And offense is for them a tactic for closing down the conversation. That's convenient. So if you play to the offense card, then you know you've allowed them to literally cancel out what meritorious argument or discussion you were going to bring to the table. So
exactly,
you know, we hear a lot about it. I mean, around here, Islam is a race. I don't get this one at all. You know, is Christianity a race? Is Buddhism a race? I just don't get this. But it's, you know, and there are fringes of the left that are walking on eggshells to such a degree that I just think, you're doing real damage. You're not helping. You're actually, what do you guys, I've heard, was it one of you three who called it the bigotry of lowered expectations? They're like, oh, those poor Muslims, those poor Muslims, you know, they're not smart enough or enlightened enough to be able to really understand what we're saying. It just leaves a horrible taste in your mouth. You know, it's usually belittling for them to do that.
Absolutely.
And I just want to repeat here that Islam actually is a race, because first you hear a loud bang, then everybody starts running.
Now he can make that joke.
Now that I've done
we
that,
need the dad joke.
He can make that joke.
No, Islam is a race. It's a race to the bottom.
Okay, anyway.
Take a drink, Obaid.
But can I just quickly respond to some things that Yas said? I know she's going to hate me for this.
No, I just want I just want to word and wrap it up.
Well, Seth wanted to know about the whole reform thing. I just want to say that I agree. There's a Muslim that doesn't want to kill me. I enjoy hanging out with him or her more, obviously, than a Muslim that does want to kill me. You know, that's obvious. But I think who we enjoy hanging out with is one thing, but what are the best arguments to convince more people? That's a separate thing, right? So I think arguments against, you know, superstition and Islam are more likely to change minds than reform arguments.
We agree, Armin. That's why
I know. I agree. I'm just saying, but that. No, I'm not saying that you're saying that, but I'm just saying I also agree with you that, yeah, of course, there are people in the reform movement are obviously better people than people in, you know, ISIS, and I enjoy hanging with them. But those are a little bit separate things. And also the thing is that neither the reform movement or the atheist movement, the ex-Muslim atheist movement, is suggesting that people can't believe in things that they want to believe in. I think the difference between us and the reform movement is the suggestion of which arguments can sell better. You know what I mean? Like, obviously, the atheist movement is not going to people like, you have to leave Islam. We are actually not going to anybody. We're sitting where we are. Like, Seth Andrews is making his podcast. Is not going to people and I've listened to my podcast. People that are interested come to us if they're curious, and they might leave Islam. So neither people in the reform movement or people in the atheist movement are suggesting that you have to change your opinion. But anyways, I just wanted to make those points.
I just like to see Armin get worked up. I always enjoy. Look, we were in Canada. I had him on camera, right? I had him on camera, and so I'm asking him the basic interview questions. So he starts the interview, and he's sitting in the chair, and he's just talking. Right, halfway through the interview, I can see he's starting to lean forward a little bit. He's literally, he's almost making love to the lens. He's just like, he's about to, and then by the end, he is, I literally thought he was going to crawl into the camera to make his point. This is a man passionate about ideas, and I respect
so good.
that.
That video of Armin was just, it's so good.
Yeah.
It was just so honest and so passionate. But anyway, I you know, we're about 1.5 hours in, so I want to kind of wrap this up here, and yeah, just say thank you very much for coming here to talk, and I hope that as you go on and everything, you know, you're triggering all the snowflakes on the far right and
on the left and
on the far left. And they are all snowflakes, and they really are all justice warriors. I don't know how these terms became partisan in a way, but I see them.
When did being interested in social causes become like, you know, if I'm a non-believer and I reject superstition, but I'm not interested in using the better information to better my life and the life of those around me, what good am I? You know, I just want to help people and make a better world, and you know, so the idea that's you know, and then the fact that SJW has become a thing and everybody's got a label for this or that, you know, if I may, before we call it a day, I just want everyone to know that I'd like to see us start these conversations without the assumption that the person we're speaking to has to be the villain. Right. You know, they don't have to be the villain for you to be a hero. Okay. This is the truth for some people, right? They need someone to play against, to be superior to. They need a soapbox to stand upon.
Everybody needs a Jew. That's what I say.
It's a what?
I said everybody needs a Jew. Sorry, go ahead, Eiley.
No, yeah, only Yasmin could say that.
It's the lazy way to be a hero. I mean, the way that either you can bring yourself up, right, or you can put other people down and feel like you're rising up. And you know, the lazy way to do it is to put other people.
Filled with a lot of people who just, that's their first instinct, the bad faith operation, expecting the worst intention, not being charitable, not forgiving. So, you know, if I look at anyone and say I haven't made mistakes and done things and said things that I regret, I mean, I'd be an awful liar. I'm a hugely flawed guy who genuinely, I love people with maybe a couple of exceptions. I love people. But really,
some anonymous Twitter people are just assholes.
There's some people that
by the way, we understand what you mean when you say you love people, because I know that a lot of people, well, what about this guy? What about that guy? What about
I get it. Yeah. I genuinely would rather build a bridge than burn one. I'm not saying the time doesn't come to burn one, but I'm just saying I'd much rather build one. I want to walk in and find opportunities to connect and try to be just human beings. I want to promote in this movement a phenomenon, a thing that we desperately need, which is the notion of positive conflict. Mm-hmm. I'm not averse to conflict. I think conflict is important. It's how ideas can be presented. But it's not bad faith, negative conflict, expecting the worst, villainizing the people that you're debating, being literally just being venomous because you can, because it makes you feel powerful. We can go in and have conflict and argue passionately about the things we care about and still care about each other and see each other in a good light as human beings. And more than anything, I'd like to see us do that. I want to commit to be better at doing that in my own life, to try to be the best I can be, to apologize for the times I screw up, to learn from my mistakes, and at the end of the day, to continue to try to stay focused on the major mission, which is to defeat superstition. All around the world, the superstition that damages people in tremendously horrible ways. I don't want to spend all this time fighting with people in my own movement. I want to go out and fight the bigger battles against religion. And I would encourage other people to join me. Let's go do it together.
Yes.
Amen.
That's beautiful.
I probably shouldn't have said that, but
I also want to thank you for, you know, you have one of the largest platform in the atheist community, and you started inviting when mostly people that were talking about Islam were ex-Muslims, and most people that were ex-Christians or, you know, born atheists were too scared. It was not very PC or cool to talk about Islam. but you didn't shy away from that. You invited us, you invited Mohammed Sayed, you invited Sarah Hayda. You didn't shy away from it. You gave us a platform, you gave us a voice. This was taboo, but I want to thank you, because ex-Muslims don't get that many allies, and so thank you for giving us a platform. Thank you.
And I discovered a new experience too, because every time we did an interview like that, for about 2 weeks on my page, there was these weird protests. They weren't even really arguments. It was just like, Allah is great. Science proves Quran. Allah is true. You know,
we know those.
Have you guys seen that? It's almost like there's some sort of weird apologetics bot out there that just rubber stamps these things, and it goes on for 2 weeks, and then they all move on to somebody. Thank you for introducing me to those people. So, all right. No, it's been an honor, and thank you, and Allah is great, and all that stuff. We'll have to do it again someday soon.
Yeah, let's just say Ali instead of Ali.
There you go.
Lolo Akbar, we say here sometimes.
He's good.
I'd also like to, if I may, extend the invitation. I know it's hard to corral all of you, but you have a standing open invitation to be a guest on my show anytime. Let's do it before the end of the year. Let's see if we can grab all 4 of you guys. And I'd like to bring the secular jihadists to the thinking atheists.
Oh, that would be awesome.
I think that'd be a party. So let's find a day on the calendar. Let's make it happen. Okay.
I've actually been talking to some sort of Western atheist groups and conference organizers who were saying that many mainstream atheist conferences are kind of shying away and avoiding the ex-Muslim thing because they don't want to be branded Islamophobes, and
really?
It's really weird. Yeah.
Thank you for treating us like human beings, like you treat everybody else, Seth. That's awesome. I appreciate it.
I would love to have a conference with you 4 on stage. It would really be something, really be compelling.
Yeah, I think so too, and I think you're one of the people who is speaking out, and I'm glad you kind of stick to your ideas and you're not that worried about what other people think. But this was an issue. Even with the Yale Humanist Society a few years ago, they were very conscious of it too. So there is the phobia thing, the fear of being called an Islamophobe. It's actually
well, even Dawkins, they're even bringing Dawkins down because he supposedly abused Islam. So
right, these are secular groups and atheist groups who. So there's a saying, and Yaz says this, and she says that all we want is for people to treat Islam the same way they treat the people in the atheist community, to treat Islam the same way they treat Christianity. Like, just understand that, just like you had the benefits of the enlightenment that happened, that you are beneficiaries of. The same kind of thing is happening in the Muslim world, and we need to get behind it, just like we got behind
and even Sam Harris, actually, I think the reason why he supported the reform movement, I think he felt so much pressure, but he didn't want to be too much anti-Islam. And even Richard Dawkins using the term Islamism, I think I think he saw that was a mistake, but I think they felt the pressure. We lost Ayaan Hirsi Ali from the ex-Muslim movement. We lost her to the reform movement. So I think a lot of them felt the pressure.
And they're still being vilified anyway, even though they moderated themselves. They're still, everybody seems to borrow them for their own particular outrage. It's crazy. And I continue. They're great examples. They're flawed people, right? They're flawed people who occasionally do stuff. We don't agree with everything they do, but we do want to take a step back and look at the worthy whole of what they are, their writings, their activism, the difference they've made in people's lives. And we want to fairly say that they have probably done more before breakfast than many of their critics have done through the whole of their entire lives.
Absolutely.
And, they changed my life. Ayaan Hirsi Ali's book, Infidel, was a huge eye-opener for me. And Dawkins' book was there for me at a critical time, and Harris's book. And so anybody who says they don't matter, they haven't mattered, they don't know what they're talking about. Those people changed my life.
Right. Speak to people in the Arab world and speak to people in the Muslim world. They'll all tell you, like, oh, and then one day I saw a Dawkins video, or that the Arabic version of the God delusion has been downloaded 10 million times.
But if even people of their caliber can be pulled down, you can kind of understand why the secular movement conference people are afraid to come near us. We're like these social lepers because they don't want to have to deal with the blowback, right? because they're all getting somebody as big as Dawkins.
Let's make something happen. Let's try to figure something out. And if we have to put it together ourselves, I think you guys be fantastic. You're born communicators, and I think you're what we need. You and more like you, and let's all get together and shake the trees and see what happens. Okay.
Perfect.
Awesome. We'll bring Dave Rubin in too, because he's another one that's been an awesome ally to us.
All right.
Seth, thank you so much, man. Thank you for coming here.
Thank you so much for having me. Thanks for everybody for watching. Been a joy. Appreciate you all very much. Thank you.